Welcome to Iconic Talk. This is your community's podcast with conversations about real estate, local happenings, and all things Winchester, Virginia. I'm Mark Francis, a local realtor, broker, and owner at Icon Real Estate.
And I'm Megan Eanes, a local realtor for 21 years and part of the Icon Real Estate team. Mark and I are so excited to share everything that we love about Winchester, Virginia with you. We want you to be an informed, savvy real estate consumer in today's ever-changing market.
Yep. If you want local knowledge, you've come to the right place. Well, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
It's exciting to know that the holiday season is almost here.
Mm-hmm.
It's something where, for me, things do slow down. You get a chance to unwind.
Right.
We're having family come over this weekend. And so I don't feel like I'm going to unwind, though, but I'm going to try.
I just had my whole family basically come over yesterday, and this is actually really funny. So, of course, the World Cup was yesterday. I'm sorry, it was on Sunday.
Yes.
So
we record this before Thursdays.
Yeah, sorry, oops. But anyway, so my whole family decided, my mom said, we're going to have a cookie extravaganza at your house. Mm-hmm. So I met my mom and my dad and my sister and her 3 little kids and then my kids, and it just got a little crazy, but they came over and the World Cup was still on. So I start trying to bake with my 5-year-old nephew, and everybody else is still watching the soccer game.
Well, of course, because it was an amazing game.
It was pretty amazing. So I'm trying to watch from the kitchen. But not only, they're like, oh, it's almost over. Well, then, of course, it goes into overtime.
Right.
Not once, but twice.
Well,
Didn't it?
Once you go to overtime, you're set for another 30 minutes.
Okay, so it's another 30.
Periods.
Okay.
Yes.
So then you had those, and then, of course, the shootout.
Yeah.
So I'm baking while my entire family is just sitting. I'm like, thanks, everybody,
Slaving
for
away.
coming over and letting me
Yes.
bake cookies for you. But then everybody joined in, and it was fun and crazy and loud, and I'm glad it was a good experience.
Yeah.
Wasn't sad for it to be quiet in my house
I'm glad
again.
it was a good experience for you. My soccer experience, unfortunately, I'm one of those guys who wants to watch something live or wants to watch something without knowing the end result, right? And so I was at church, and of course the game was happening when I was at church, but I have a group text thread of a bunch of soccer people who are blowing up my phone. And I knew what they were talking about, and I intentionally did not look at it. And I didn't want to silence it either, because then I would see what's going on. So I was just like, I'm going to ignore my phone. My phone rings, I'm answering it, and so I'm talking to somebody, and all of a sudden more texts blow up. And the way that my iPhone works is that if it's in locked mode, you don't see the text. If it's open, you will see and read the text.
Right.
Of course. Way later down the road where I thought the texting would have been over with, and I'm like, okay, things are happening now. I saw it. And unfortunately, I didn't get all the result information, so it was still exciting to watch. But looking back on it, I should have just turned my whole phone off and then known, okay, I don't have to listen to any of the nonsense.
So were you rooting for Argentina or France?
I don't really know. I mean, I was rooting for a good game.
Right.
I have a little bit of ties more to France. I went there and traveled like 5 years ago, did we're about ready to talk about this, but a school event that was like a family swap kind of thing. Went there with my son, and we hosted a kid, and we went over there, and so it was kind of fun. And that was around the previous World Cup when France won.
Oh, right.
So I was thinking, okay, I'll probably be rooting for France. But then in the middle of the game, knowing kind of where the result would be, I was more rooting for Argentina. So.
Well, Messi.
Long story. Yeah, I know. I never really been a Messi fan, but now I think you have to be. I mean, he's now going to be a new super god in Argentina. So
very cool.
There you go. For all the soccer nerds out there, there's your warm and fuzzy stories of our World Cup experience.
Sorry if you haven't watched it yet, but then obviously
exactly. Then you're missing out.
Obviously, you haven't had the news on or anything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, talk about how we have our introduction segment every single time. If you want local knowledge, you've come to the right place.
Right.
We're able to, I think, get a steal of an interview because Richard Bell has been in town for 25 years or so and has become an entrenched person in our community. Recently, newly elected city council member for the City of Winchester. Megan, you and I had a chance to chat with him.
Yeah, we did.
And we were excited to share this with you because you're going to learn a lot. He also is a principal broker and owner of Adams Companies and Adam Nelson Associates, commercial real estate, property management, the whole works. He has a big history there. Plus, now that he's in politics, you get a chance to hear his perspective of what that looks like. So here's our chat with newly elected Winchester City Council member Richard Bell. Well, here we are with Richard Bell, and so excited to have you here on the show because you have a world of knowledge and also a big history here with Winchester. So we're excited about having you here, and you get a chance to tell us your story. So,
okay.
Yeah. So you have a lot of different hats, which we're going to get to. And then part of that is going to be you telling your story. So give us a quick rundown of how you came to Winchester, about your family, and, how you got into the business that you're in today.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've lived here since 97. So everything I've done has been kind of in the last 25 years. People say you've been here for a long time. There are a lot of people who would say you ain't been here at all, buddy.
Right.
You're just a new guy.
A townie, like we call them.
Yeah.
Right. So what brought you to town in 97?
Well, I'd started out after high school in the Navy. I was living in the Virginia Beach area and served in the military there. Actually got stationed in Norfolk for 8 years, so didn't travel too far. But I did get to, sail to some interesting places. But then as I was kind of like figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I ended up at University of Virginia in their architecture program.
Nice.
Okay.
And that's where I met my now wife, Sarah.
So she went there too?
She was there as an older student. She was 28, I was 31, I guess. And so I graduated in 95, and we thought we were going to stay in Charlottesville. And Sarah's family were here already. Her mom and her dad were helping to run a real estate business. They had helped develop the Airport Business Center and a few other area projects. And then her brother, Kevin, who many people may remember, but he passed away in 2001. Unexpectedly, but he recruited me to come up with my architecture. I was working for a contractor builder in Charlottesville, and he said, "Hey, come up and take a look at this project and give me your. I need to, I'll pay you. Give me a construction estimate.
Yeah.
I need it for the bank. I don't even remember what bank it was, so if you're listening, don't worry. But it was the old Salvation Army headquarters, which is now our offices. So I came up for like 3 days and crawled around in there, drew up some drawings and, did some estimates and gave it to him. And he says, all right, here's a paycheck. Went back to Charlottesville thinking we were all done. And Sarah just had 3 days reconnecting with her family. And maybe a month or so later, he says, okay, we got the loan. When do you want to start?
Wow. Yeah.
And that was kind of the enticement that brought us up here. So we moved here in 97, like I said. Graduated in 95, got married in 96, moved here in 97.
Easy to remember.
Yeah. It's just like progression.
Yeah.
And then, was working with him. I have a degree in architecture. I'm not a registered architect. And that kind of comes into play in some of what I've done because it was architecture and I minored in urban planning and in preservation, which has been a nice fit with the background information for what I've done since I've been here.
Yeah.
And then when Kevin passed away, I remember that so vividly that, because he was kind of a larger-than-life guy. And so I'm thinking, well, I guess I can get a job somewhere else. And everybody in the business was kind of staring at me like, what do we do now? And so I started giving directions of what we need to do to keep things going. And the next thing I know, they're like, you should be running this company.
And the name of the company then?
There was multiple companies. We went under the umbrella of the Adams Companies, which is kind of just a moniker. But it was Adams Nelson and Associates, which is the commercial real estate brokerage. Adams Nelson Property Management, which was exactly that. It was a property management company. And Adams Nelson Management, which is more of an asset management and general contracting. side. We had a little side gig called Pegasus Properties that was a residential firm, but we kind of wrapped that up after shortly after he passed away, and that's when I learned that I had a background in architecture and construction, but I didn't have a background in real estate.
Yeah.
So,
but everyone's looking at you, saying, "Okay, you're the man."
Yeah, and we went through a series of acting brokers and supervising brokers, and but I knew right then if this was going to be falling on my shoulders, I needed to get my real estate license because you got to serve actively for 3 years and successfully before you can become a broker.
Right.
So that was a good bit of education for me, and again, continuing to try and run it from outside of the organization, because you've got a supervising broker, but you're really the manager of kind of driving the bus, and so that kind of brought me more into the property and asset management side of the equation. And then obviously the commercial brokerage side, and that's probably where I've excelled best, is getting into the real estate side of it. And I am definitely, and most people will tell you, I am a generalist by nature. I know a lot about a lot, and most of it's useless. I'm not a specialist. So I draw on a lot of details. I kind of feel like I'm like the conductor of the orchestra. I know all the instruments, I just can't play them. And you just got to learn how to kind of pull them all together to get the best result.
How have you seen the company grow over the years since that kind of 2001 time to here and now?
I mean, we have grown in certain areas. I mean, when Kevin was still alive, we were actually what they called the Fantastic 50, 50 fastest growing companies in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And we were in the small business category. That was just some trajectory of transactions that had been done. And I knew we weren't going to keep pace on that one.
Right.
So we just slowly started to kind of steer towards what are we good at. We stopped doing third-party property management because that was thankless.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
I get it.
But we continue to do our own kind of closely held portfolio, and then handling the asset management side of that, insurance, financing, lease management, and whatnot. So that's again, that's another, gives you a kind of a broad understanding of just life in general. It's not just real estate. I mean, everything involves, financing, whether it's a mortgage or a car payment or whatnot. So understanding how to negotiate them, understanding the terms, insurance as well.
And interacting with people. I mean,
sure.
It's all relational of how you're doing this.
Exactly. And life is scalable, so you can say Winchester's a small town, but this would apply wherever you were. It is relational. You want to establish good relationships. You want to establish yourself with integrity and create those relationships so that people can kind of see who you are, what you're made of, what your decision-making process are. Do you stand by your word? Can I count on you? And I've always tried to be that. I've participated in the community early on, and most of it was I was kind of, I won't say pulled kicking and screaming, but the career I was in was very demanding.
Yeah.
And shortly after we moved here, Sarah and I started our family. So we had 3 kids in rapid succession. So they're all right now is 24, 22, and 20. I tell them we're in our even years, and soon we'll be in our odd years, and it's kind of like
that's a good way to remember it, though.
But now the empty nester, though.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah.
But it's now we our kids are great, and we enjoy having them and being around them, and so they're fun. My wife actually was traveling with my older son overseas, and they had a blast.
Nice.
So back to where was I?
Yeah, well basically where I'm leading is you've been in our community.
Oh, yeah.
Building relationships, building the business, and being a face of a company for now 20
Sure.
years. And so how has that then pushed you and led you into this almost political career? Let me just say that, because
Sure.
what drew you into that with your architectural background and urban planning background? Obviously you have the skills to be involved in the city. But then there's got to be some sort of nudge. Like what pushed you into attempting to get into politics?
And what I was starting to say was everything that I've done, I've been kind of recruited or asked. Like I was asked to serve on the Board of Architecture Review. I had my architecture degree. Again, I'm not a registered architect, but they said that meets the requirement. We really would like you to be on it. So that was kind of my first step into community leadership, I guess we'd say, because in probably in about 2 or 3 years on there, I kind of found myself being, well, you're the chairman now.
Right.
So how long had you been here and working for the company that you were with before you were approached?
About 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2 years. And a lot of what we did was historic preservation work, hit rehabs, and I think that kind of, I was on the other side of the table on a couple of occasions, so I also knew what the issues were, what the challenges were for the applicant. And so, we worked to try and not streamline that, but to make it a little bit more user-friendly and interactive, help to develop guidelines because a lot of people were complaining that, it's so arbitrary. It's like we've got nothing to really work with.
Yeah.
And there were guidelines in place, but we kind of codified them so that it was a little easier for people to understand them. And I think that's a constantly revising process for them. And then, I was serving in the chamber. I was telling you before that I was brought in as just a board member, and then didn't realize what happens there as you eventually evolve into the chairs, using the air quotes here.
Yes.
And and then that certainly connects you with the community a lot more than you're prepared for. In the years that I was in the chairs, I don't remember whether it was vice chair or chair-elect, is when we worked to absorb Clark County, became the regional chamber. We were actually in this building right here.
Yep.
And
that was what, like 05, 06, maybe even before then?
Yeah.
Trying to remember.
I think I served on the board through 2007 or 2008.
Okay.
And I think that's when this building was sold. We helped the chamber buy the old Sacred Heart Rectory, relocated it there, which they've now moved out to the airport terminal.
Yep.
Which, again, for a regional organization, I think that's a good fit. But then we lost a CEO, hired a CEO, and all of this while I was, either vice chair or chair. It was a taxing period of time, but it also kind of helps you to fine-tune like organizational management, decision-making skills, recognizing you're never going to please everybody, and you just got to figure out what's going to be best for the organization. Sometimes the organization truly is an organization. Sometimes the organization is your community.
Yeah.
So you got to look holistically. But at the same time, the city, I guess, saw some, skill sets in me and asked me to serve on what used to then be a joint economic development commission. So it was Winchester, Frederick County. I served on that for 8 years, and that kind of gave me a more regional perspective. And the impacts of the economic kind of pistons of our community, whether it's the inland port, transportation and trucking, Shenandoah, Winchester Medical Center. You kind of see how it all not necessarily knits together, but bumps up against each other.
Right. And those are all volunteer positions of kind of people asking you to come do this.
Right.
Then there's the next level of elections
Yeah.
and
Well,
voting and candidate, and that's an entire new world that like I'm really curious about.
It is. It was
taking it to that next level of saying, okay, I have to go around and campaign a little bit.
Well, it was definitely, one of the next things, probably the pinnacle of my being asked to serve was being appointed to the school board.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was back in the day when it was appointed. It was an interview process. And, that's probably where, I won't say did my best work, but felt like the work that was being done was the most productive in any organization I've been in. Everybody was pulling in the same direction. Everybody had their heart and their head were in it. I worked with some very intelligent, passionate, committed people. And these were all volunteers.
Yeah.
So, I served 2 terms. And at the end of my second term is right when the city was voting to make an elected position. And so they said, well, if you want to run for if you want a third term, you're going to have to run for it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to run, if I'm going to actually get into this, let me take it to the next level and run for city council. So that was a tough family decision because, again, this was an area we've never stepped into and never pursued. But I was being asked again to run and was, told, we got your back. But when you find out then you're running, it's a pretty, not solitary, but you gotta know who really has your back. And my family really had my back. And, so my wife, my biggest supporter, she helped me campaign because I'm an introvert. I mean, I am not.
And she will get out there, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And she kind of, and actually who helped kind of seal the deal for me was Judy McKernan. And I knew her from, while I was on the school board, she was the director of student services. And, she had been elected, and she shared with me over coffee one morning. She says, Richard, I've got a saying on my wall. It's that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. I'm like, okay, all right. I think I hear what you're saying. And definitely, had those uncomfortable moments while running because, again, you really put yourself out there. You make yourself maybe not vulnerable, but available to slings and arrows, as well as appreciation and positive impact and input. But that's tough. I mean, it's a different skill set than actually being in an organizational leadership role.
Yeah.
To be able to do both well, I won't say takes a special person, but it's the ability to bring all those skill sets to it. It's hard.
So give us a timeline. So that school board second term ended, and then they said you have to run, and the progression of then going to city council.
Yeah, what year was that?
2012, I think I served from 2012 until 2020.
Okay.
So I knew in, I think it was the 2019 election where they elected to do the elected school board. So we kind of saw the handwriting on the wall there, and I'm like, I'm not gonna run for school board, and was approached by somebody to actually Mayor Smith and said, hey, would you run for city council? Feeling like I had some more gas in the tank and I wanted to continue to serve and that this was the next level. The challenge in front of me that I was the opportunity for me to run in Ward 1 was to run against Les Veach. And he was a 3-term incumbent and he was well known. And so you really had to kind of get out there and get my name out there.
Right.
But also just knocked on every door. Ran our own campaign. It was all positive. It wasn't anything about, no mudslinging, and I appreciate that we were able to get through that campaign in a positive way. It wasn't successful.
Right.
It did very well, but then Bill Wiley, got his seat on the House of Delegates. So
that's a fascinating story. So the behind the scenes component there, Les Veach wins. Yes. And then Bill Wiley is then going to a different base. I mean, he's leaving because he got elected
in the same election.
In the same election cycle.
And so within, and some people will say, well, we knew in August that Bill was going to win. And that by winning, he was going to have to step down and vacate his seat. I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't look at it that way. It was like 3 days after the election.
Right.
I was like, oh, so, I was asked, would you consider filling the seat?
So then that then became an appointed thing?
Yeah, it was appointed, but, you had to kind of submit your resume and then get vetted by the full council. I'd been vetted for the last 3 months by the community.
Right.
And got a good percentage of the vote, just not the majority. So I felt, I had the endorsement of Ward 1 to serve. And, but there's there's something humbling about the title of interim counselor.
Yeah.
You were referred to as interim counselor.
Because, I mean, as just an outsider looking in, you're like, wait a minute, we just went through a voting cycle. Now, all of a sudden, this same person is now getting appointed or interim council member.
Right. And then the reality of it was I had about 4 or 5 months to kind of get my feet under me, and then there was the special election the following November. So I had to run immediately right after that. And that was a straight up election, but it was only for the remaining term. So I was serving for 1 more year, and then if I wanted to serve a full 4-year term, it was another election. So there was 3 elections in 3 years.
So you got the campaign world under your belt now.
Yeah, that's a lot of
I got
campaigning.
it under my, yeah, we've learned what works, what doesn't work, what's important, what's not important. But we also learned that it's a draining process. It can be a draining process. Depending on how you approach it.
Well, as a common introvert, I feel for you of the world of going around knocking on door to door. And you came to my door and we have chats, but that's just that can be draining as well. Of just you got to be able to meet people, get out there and share your vision. And so I want to have you have the opportunity to share what were you talking about, what was your vision during the campaign. And then follow up, where do you see us going as a city now that you're here? So kind of give us the two-parted answer there.
Well, I'll grab the I won't say the easy ones, but the shorter ones is obviously 8 years on the school board. I'm a strong proponent of our public schools. And, I've got a kind of an inside track of how it works, how it's organized, what Winchester Schools does for the community. But you also kind of see the shortcomings of the communities within the school system. I mean, they touch all corners, both from a social services standpoint and an employment standpoint. So continuing to support our public schools is helpful in supporting and growing our community. It's part of what makes us attractive.
Well, as a realtor, that's one of the things that buyers come in and talk to us about.
Sure.
Right.
They say, what's the school systems? What do they like? And some parents really get in the weeds of looking up, okay, what are the stats on these schools? So obviously the city has a great historical track record of city. But I know some of the inner workings of it. If COVID has taken impact on the schools and how we do things. And maybe that is a platform that we talk about, but just the idea of, how do we continue to grow as a city with growing and improving our school systems and the teachers and the the next generation. That's really what we're talking about here.
Well, I'll get to that in the third leg of the stool. And the second leg is just with my background in urban planning. When I first got here, got in with a local organization that was trying to promote bike trails and walkways, and we eventually evolved into what's now the Green Circle. So I'm a strong proponent of that, of the Green Circle, outdoor connections, outdoor spaces. So our enhancing our parks, expanding our trail system, and our preserved areas. Those are, it's during COVID, I heard so many people saying, we love the Green Circle because it was an opportunity to be outside and still connect with people.
Yep.
And it's also an opportunity for you to be able to move around the city more safely and with connection to nature.
Yep.
So the third leg of the stool is probably the biggest one is, and as a community we're still kind of grappling with, is the housing and the development.
Yeah.
Dispelling a common myth or an easy rock to throw at me, I am not a developer. I mean, I am a developer if redeveloping historic properties is being a developer. So the thing that we're struggling with is the demand for housing and opportunity. And we'll just say with housing, because with the growth in housing, growth and opportunity will follow. It's because we're an attractive location. We're an attractive location both geographically, physically, economically, and also some of the amenities we have here, which is good quality school systems. When I hear people say, "Why are you letting this development happen?" I'm like, nobody's letting it happen. It's supply and demand. We're an attractive community. We're an attractive market. Would you rather us kind of make ourselves look less attractive? Would you, how do you want us to slow growth?
Yeah.
Do you want us to kind of crash the school system, not invest in our parks? Because the more you do that, the more people are going to say, what an attractive place to be. But, what we have to be focused on is, our zoning code is our rule book. It's kind of the blueprint. The comprehensive plan kind of lays the table, but if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, it's in our zoning. And there are some nuances in zoning that are, make it fairly attractive for developers to pursue projects that may or may not be in the, I won't say best interest of the community, but the community doesn't make out as well. Certain bonus densities that we were offering that would allow them to build more units, but the community didn't really get something as much in return.
Okay.
So we've been, I've kind of brought that up since I've been on council, and we've, with the housing study that was done right when I was coming on council, it kind of shows where our shortfalls and our gaps are. This is kind of an important thing for us to look at because we are in deficit for housing. And I'm not just talking single-family detached. We're in deficit across the board.
Yeah. Well, in the city, land is at a premium.
Right.
I mean, it's not like there's just a plethora of land that you can just start developing. So we're talking about, all right, where are the areas and where are the locations where developers can enhance a certain area and then make it affordable. So
yeah, those are two very different things.
What does that look like and what does that mean? Because you're using kind of both of those words.
Yeah.
So to you, what is affordable? I'm just curious. And what's the target goal? And then where are some of the locations that we're talking about?
Yeah, and it's good to be able to differentiate those two questions. What is affordable is, I won't say arbitrary, but you've got these scales of the area median income, and that's just an aggregate. And unfortunately, our area median income is wrapped in with the county. So if you got more affluence that's happening in the county, it's kind of driving up our area median income. So if I told you our area median income was like $84,000, you'd go, what? So if you break it down just to 22601, maybe it's not that high. But it's then classified as, if you are at AMI, boom, you're at 100%. Then 80%, 50%, and 30%. 30% AMI is basically somebody living on disability or Social Security. That is going to be the real challenge for our community because housing across the board is pretty much private development, private investment.
Right.
Right.
And private investment, you just can't incentivize private investment to that level where you can tackle 30% AMI. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a real challenge to
For
do
our
that.
listeners that might not know what is AMI?
Area median income.
Okay.
So basically, it's an aggregate of the
County and
the city and the county,
Right.
our metropolitan statistical area, that kind of says this is what people earn here. And obviously, there are people going, I don't earn anywhere near that. But then, it's median.
Right.
There are people who are earning a lot more than that are pulling everything up. So we have some affluence in the area that's driving that area median income up. And it's that number that the people who want more grocery stores, that's a number that the grocery chains look at.
Like Trader Joe's.
Yeah, right. But
Not mentioning
That's
any names.
that's a challenge.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's another whole podcast,
Yeah.
I'll tell you. But the connection between affordability and new construction is in the density, and that's what a lot of people are having a real hard time getting their head wrapped around. Why are they squeezing so many units onto this land? Well, if you've got 4 acres that you've got that's available for residential development, under certain zoning, you could put 16 houses on it. We need greater density than that. Not everywhere, but in areas where we can get it, when you're looking at apartments or townhouses, you'd like to be seeing more than that. And the more you can get on the land per acre, the more affordable it becomes. You
Right.
can
Sure.
disperse or spread that cost basis out for your site development, land acquisition, off-site improvements. And the lower the density you get, which is what some people want, the more costly it's going to be, not only for the construction but for the land acquisition. So it's finding that balancing point.
So are there benefits in place now for these private developers to do things? Or
Sure.
is your vision to grow and improve and increase those benefits?
It's not necessarily growing the benefits, but yes, the benefits that are in place are under certain zoning approaches where you can rezone it, like the planned unit development, PUD, as people refer to it, allows you to offer certain things subscribed in the zoning text, like developing on a bus route for public transit. Green building initiatives, like a LEED certification that would have it be more of energy efficient, so that the users would benefit from lower energy costs. Electric vehicle charging stations, bike share programs, stuff like that. There are other things. I don't want to bore everybody with that, but 2 examples in there is, hey, if you do bike share, we'll give you a 5% bonus. Hey, if you do electric vehicle charging stations, we'll give you a 5% bonus. Well, when you're looking at those numbers, you're like, well, that seems inconsequential, doesn't it?
Right.
Well, add them together, and you're basically looking at approximately a 10% bonus for those 2 things. And then in the fine print of the code, it's a minimum of 5 bikes. And then there's no description of scalability, a minimum of 3 electric vehicle charging stations. So if I've got somebody who wants to build 20 townhomes on a parcel, and they go through this and say, I'll put electric vehicle charging stations, they'll put 3 electric vehicle charging stations. That's great. I'll put a bike share there, and I get 2 more units. So the scale of that doesn't feel out of whack with what the community or the citizens benefit from. Well, now you've got these larger, more urban scale solutions to our housing that are coming in with 200, 300 units. 3 electric vehicle charging stations and 5 bikes just got you 20 or 30 more units. So we need to add some scalability in there. We need to add in some components that address affordability. Say, if you want these more units, 10% of them have to be that 80% of AMI. Again, trying to push it down, private investment down to 50% is challenging, 30% unattainable. So that's going to be a challenge for our community, as there is no clear definition of affordable unless you kind of pin to AMI and say, when we talk about affordability, let's just talk about that in those terms.
Yeah.
Because, the armchair quarterbacks will all say, well, that's not affordable. Well, tell me what is affordable. Well, when I was growing up here, I paid $300 a month. I'm like,
Yeah. No.
it's not the same
Not the
community
same.
you grew up in. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Well, and Winchester is great because it has grown over the years in this kind of slow growth to where there's something for everyone.
Sure.
We talked about the school systems. It's also high up there on a top retirement community in the country, not just the state. So there is an aspect of what Winchester is doing to draw people, which I love. And so as you look to the future, and as you have a little bit of several months and year or two under your belt in city council, like where do you see the projections going of the growth of kind of, and your role in that, life as a city council member, you still have your businesses that you're working with as well. You haven't given that up. So I feel like that there's
Not entirely.
not entirely. Yeah. So finding that balance, where do you see us going in the next several years for Winchester?
Well, I mean, from just my perception, I don't see the demand in our community waning anytime soon. I mean, we've seen very stable and manageable growth, I would say. I mean, it's less than 1% per year. From a growth factor, that seems very manageable. When you couple us with the county, the county's at 2.1% per year. And, that's, to me, that's almost unsustainable unless you're out in front of it with infrastructure, with schools. They're now scrambling to build a fourth high school when they probably should have done it 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Just me saying.
Yeah.
My oldest
the
son
city
was,
versus county, fighting.
my oldest son was supposed to have graduated from that new high school in 2019, I think, and now he's 3 years in the Air Force. So we obviously there's still no school of any kind.
He would have graduated from the school that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. That was
So
when it first came out, all the plans, and they bought the land. Yeah, that was obviously it has gone nowhere since then.
Yeah.
Well,
One day.
So,
We'll have a new high school.
again, I think, the growth trajectory is going to go, in a positive upward trend, hopefully tracking on about that same growth rate. My sense is it's probably going to start to stratify, maybe get a little bit more older folks here if we are attracting more retirees. It's a question of whether the retirees land into 22601 or just in the region.
Yeah.
We don't really know that yet. We think really the way in which downtown is growing with the types of development that's occurring and the density, when you're talking about more like efficiencies, 1 and 2 bedrooms, you're not really talking about large families. You're talking about more, the old acronym of the young urban professional. And I think we're probably going to see a little bit more of that. But it's not going to be isolated to those. We're still going to see growth in families. I hope we do. I mean, we've got capacity in our school system. More students actually make a more thriving, vibrant community. And I'm hopeful that what we're seeing now by making Winchester a more attractive place is that the people who go through our school system decide to stay.
Yeah. And I'm seeing more of that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is this this draw that people who grow up here are staying, and young professionals. I feel like there are more of them around than there were 20 years ago when I first moved into town. And so there is a draw, which I love it. And I will also say we could probably keep talking on for hours about multiple topics, and we're going to hopefully have on another one of your, I would call them cohorts from the city, Mike Ruddy.
Oh, yeah.
In a few weeks, in the beginning of the year, sometime in January. So he'll be able to expand on this community development thought for where we're going to go. But just to wrap up with you today,
Sure.
give us just a take of day in the life of city council? Like, how often are you meeting? What goes on in those meetings? Is it open to the public? Just paint a quick little picture in a couple minutes what city council looks like.
And it's hard to say day to day, but on month to month, because I serve on 2 committees for the council, I end up with about 5 meetings a month minimum, and then there's usually the prep time and follow ups and questions and answers. So in an easy week, I'm doing about 10 hours. In a more typical or robust week, it's about 20 hours of work towards just city council, whether it's meetings or follow-ups or research. And then eventually, I've been on council for about 2 years now. Your brain rewires a little bit, so you start seeing things through that lens where everything is the city, hey, I should tell the arborist about that tree, or, oh, when are we going to get over and get the leaves on this street? And you become kind of almost a community advocate, which is a good thing, but it's not the role of city council. City council, I kind of view as you're kind of the board of directors. You give directions and course corrections to the city manager. The city manager is responsible for running the day-to-day operations of the city. And through that, I feel like I develop a good relationship with the senior staff. I can have open and professional conversations with them, and things get done through, as we started this conversation, relationship based. If what you're asking for is reasonable, if what you're asking for makes sense, if what you're asking for follows the direction of the strategic plan or the comprehensive plan, then sure, let's do that. That's a great idea. And you're always looking towards, or I am usually looking for new initiatives towards expanding what we're doing. Like now that we're in the final phase for the Green Circle, it's connecting over to Shenandoah University, and okay, well, that's connected right with Jim Barnett Park. So let's push that trail system up through Jim Barnett. That's easy. Jump across the street, run it through Daniel Morgan campus. That's easy too. And then figure out a way to get it over to Friendship Park, and then bank over to Douglas Park, and then bring it back into the north end of downtown, and start to tie those neighborhoods and those communities into the system so that we feel a little bit more engaged with each other.
Is there somewhere you can go to actually see a map of the Green Circle? Because I've always wanted that. I guess I probably should just have Googled it. But...
you can Google it. It is definitely something on the city's website to give you chapter and verse of the URL. I couldn't tell you that.
Right.
But it's available where you can see it, at least the current 6.5 miles of it. The phase I'm talking about is conceptual right now. And it's probably on a map in the city manager's office, but anyway.
But that's a good point, though. So just my last question is, so the general public, as they're listening or as they want to submit ideas or learn information what's happening, how do they reach out? How do they connect with the city?
And there's a lot of opportunities to connect with the city. And, I don't know if it's every other week or every week with the City News, CITE News.
Okay.
It's an electronic newsletter. You subscribe to it online, and you get a ton of information because it's full of links that are like, hey, what's happening in City Council this week? And it'll have links to all the agenda items that you can then kind of drill down into reading the staff report, looking at the drawings. There are opportunities for you to submit public comments. There are opportunities for public hearings at a lot of these formal actions, like your rezonings. You'll have a public hearing with the Planning Commission. You'll have a public hearing with the City Council. But those are during those meetings. Public comments you can submit online at any time. I strongly encourage people to do that. Also on the website is all the contact information for all the individual council members, email, and usually a home or a mobile phone. I encourage people to reach out that way as well. It's sometimes the response is, thank you for your input. And sometimes that's a really good idea.
Right.
Or I see what the issue is. Let me get back to you. But again, it's you don't want to take on that role of I'm the world's problem solver. And, you are kind of balancing that act between
Right.
I'm on the board of directors here, but I want to be responsive to the constituents and the concerns of the community because I'm one of them.
Right.
I mean, I live in
Right.
the community.
Right.
So, that's the challenge of being on council is kind of balancing those two and staying grounded as just a citizen of the community as well as an elected leader.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, Richard, thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
You're a wealth of knowledge, and you've definitely motivated us to say, okay, we need to do some more research on what's happening behind the scenes,
Right.
and go to those sites and be
Yeah,
proactive as a community member.
If through your podcast you have the way to kind of publish or post
Absolutely.
those
Yep.
those links,
Those will be
I
up there.
think, and you can verify any of them with Amy Simmons, or just grab them right off the website. But I
Great.
think they're awesome resources for everyone to be tapped into.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, again, thanks so much. Merry Christmas and to you and your
To you
family.
as well.
And we look forward to bumping into you again soon.
Right, thank you for being
Thanks,
here.
Richard.
All right, thank you. All right.
Well, thanks so much, Richard. And yes, I know that we could have chatted for another 45 minutes
Right.
plus with him. He gave us all other kinds of ideas of other conversations for our podcasts next year, I think. So
It was just really exciting, and just to kind of hear his progression of kind of being kind of pushed into some things
Yeah.
and then just
Yeah.
really doing such a great job at it. And then it was, okay, here's something, here's what's next and what's next, to the point where he ended up becoming an elected official. So,
Yeah.
and the school board seemed to be a real big passion of his, the
Yeah.
school system.
yeah, I think that's definitely one for another conversation
Right.
of the school systems and what that looks like, because doing it for 8 years, that's a long time, to be a part of school board and learning to work with people from that standpoint.
And parents.
And the principals and the teachers, and just so much that goes into that. So unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to cover too much of that, but that's setting us up for some other conversations
That's right.
next year. So yeah, Richard, thanks so much for being there. And, I didn't share this earlier, but on that France trip that I told you about in the beginning, where I was on a school event, kind of a family swap, where we hosted a kid and then our kid was over there and I actually went as a chaperone. The Bells were on that trip with me.
Oh, okay.
And we were able to get to know each other a lot better there because our kid was similar age. And we sat down at coffee shops. We went to wineries together, traveled around, and yeah, they're an amazing family. And so that was even before I started Icon Real Estate, and I was picking his brain of some of the things
Oh,
to think
wow.
about as a realtor back then. So
That's a neat connection
Yeah,
between the
neat
two
connection.
of you.
So-
and the business too.
and like he was talking about, just building relationships.
That's right.
He didn't know that I was thinking about starting a company when I was talking about that. But it's just it's neat to how our town is a small town, and we get a chance to connect in that way. So, tell us what is going on in town this weekend.
So local events we've got coming up here. We've got I love these, the Christmas Eve luminaries that are in Whittier Acres neighborhood. It'd be fascinating to find out how long they've been doing that. For as long as I can remember.
As long
since
as I can
the
remember
80s,
too. Sure.
But that starts at 5:45 on Christmas Eve through
Awesome.
Whittier Acres neighborhood. There's also the Bell Grove Plantation Holiday Tours. Those are through December 30th, Monday through Saturday, 10 to 4, and Sunday 1 to 5. So they get Christmas by candlelight on self-guided tours and live music. That sounds really cool too. And of course, what we talked about last week on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
We've got the Walking in a Winter Wonderland.
Still
that's
going on.
Still going on through January 1st. Under 2 is free. Get your tickets ahead of time. They're $6.50, or at the gate, it's going to be $8.50, and bring a credit card.
But just know that Santa's not going to be there for those couple days.
He's busy.
He's busy, of course.
He's got some things to do. So that's what's going on here coming up. And of course, we've got Christmas soon. And
I'm excited. We will recap Christmas next week. We will also recap the year.
that's right.
Give our official first, hopefully traditional and annual year in review here for Iconic Talk. So look forward to that next week. Thanks so much for joining us in this episode of Iconic Talk. We hoped you've learned something. I know I did from today's episode, and look forward to sharing more with you next week. Remember, when you look for a real estate professional, make sure they're experienced, innovative, personal, dedicated, and available.
And we appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us. We'd love it if you'd take a moment to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends.
Yep. Thanks again to our editor extraordinaire, Simeon Battaglia. Until next time, think iconic.